Can everyone please take your seats? We'd like to get started. We might be a minute or two off schedule, and you know, that doesn't make Yale very happy. I hope everyone's been enjoying the conference so far. It's been a great couple days. Dr. Brown this morning was so inspirational, and the breakout sessions were great, and I hope you're going to enjoy this session just as much. Before we commence today's proceedings, I want to draw your attention once again to the record number of college students participating in this year's national conference. This is proof that we, as Jewish National Fund, its educational initiatives, programs, and Israel Continuum are working. It gives meaning to the phrase from birth to boardroom. And I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the presence of our future young leaders with us throughout this weekend, and of course, for this important session this morning. At this time, I'd like to welcome Jewish National Fund's incoming Vice President of Campaign, Ben Guttman, to the stage. As many of you know, Ben is a true stalwart of JNF, and while his contributions to our organization are too numerous to mention, most recently, Ben chaired several President's Society missions, as well as a 2017 national conference in South Florida. Now, Ben, I'd like to turn the podium over to you.
Thank you, Janie. Thank you, Janie. Wow, there's a lot of people in this room. And it's a pleasure to look out and see so much of my JNF family here. I'm Ben Guttman, and a proud member of the World Chairman's Council. It is indeed my honor to have the opportunity to work with all of you to raise the dollars necessary for Jewish National Fund to build the land of Israel, to meet the needs of his people, for today and for future generations. The work of Jewish National Fund has evolved, yet we have the same singular mission and focus we've ever had to make life better for all who call Israel home and for the Jewish people everywhere. That's our why. Why do we do what we do? Everything we do is strategic and planned to enhance the quality of life for Israel's people. During this conference, you will hear about what we have done with the dollars raised, and what we look to do in the coming years. But in the short time I have to speak with you, I want to talk with you about money, how we will raise the necessary dollars to see JNF's vision, your vision, become a reality. After all, the work we do needs to be paid for. Nothing we have accomplished or will achieve can happen without money. Let's just put that out on the table. Let me paraphrase the famous quote by Theodore Herzl. If you will it, you must pay for it. So what did Herzl do? He founded Jewish National Fund, the fund to create the nation and buy and develop the land for the Jewish people everywhere. And it's been our job to pay for that work for almost 120 years. The blue box we're also familiar with is a foundation stone of the modern state of Israel, and we still have lots of work to do. I believe philanthropy is strategic, that philanthropy is about leadership, and philanthropy is about making a difference. I believe JNF USA is one of the great philanthropic organizations and the leading Zionist organization. Yes, because of the work it does, but also because JNF allows each of us to be philanthropists. Through JNF, we are builders in the land of Israel and builders of the land of Israel. Through JNF, we are making a difference. 6 years ago, at JNF's national conference in Los Angeles, we announced a $1 billion 10-year campaign goal, the $1 billion roadmap. We didn't just establish a fundraising goal, we outlined JNF's priorities over the next decade. No other organization has done that. We didn't just say how much money we wanted to raise. we detailed what we needed the money for and the strategies with which we were going to accomplish the goals. I am pleased to tell you that we've already achieved $620 million toward our $1 billion goal. That's $620 million in just 6 years. Thanks to each of you for helping us reach that number. Yes, we have done well so far. Yet our research shows us that if we are to sustain what has become a $100 million annual campaign, we need 10,000 donors giving $1,000 or more annually. In 2010, we had $3,600 donors giving $1,000 or more. In 2015, just under 5,000 gave at that level. And this year, about 6,000 donors. For 2020, I need your assistance to find 4,000 more donors. We have a plan, but a plan is only as good as the people behind it. You are those people. Help us ask 4,000 more people to participate. It seems like a big number, but when we put it in perspective, each community just needs to do its part. We need 100 more donors in Phoenix, 20 in St. Louis, 300 in LA, 500 in New York, and 200 in South Florida, just to name a few community goals. You see where I'm going with this? With your help, we can reach the target. Now let's look at it another way. If each of us in this room helps recruit just 2 people, we're almost there. The growth of JNF USA over the last 2 decades has been incredible. But let's be honest, sometimes it feels like we're still the best-kept secret since your Bubby's brisket recipe. I'm not kidding. It's up to each of us to share the great story of Jewish National Fund. And it is a great story. When you go home tomorrow, tell your friends you're in Washington, D.C. with over 1,200 pro-Israel supporters at Jewish National Fund Conference. Tell them how JNF is making a difference, is making history. Tell them that they too can participate, and ask them to join you as a supporter of the land and people of Israel through Jewish National Fund. Each of us represents dozens of friends, family, and business acquaintances who may join the JNF family of donors. All we have to do is share our enthusiasm and our joy in supporting Israel through Jewish National Fund. I'm asking you to be a philanthropist, not just write a check, but also be a doer. My friends, Jewish National Fund is making history. We are carving communities from sand. We helped Israel become the world leader in water recycling for agriculture. Our Alexander Muss High School in Israel is educating thousands of kids from the US and around the world to love Israel and become leaders among their peers. We have greened Israel and helped her feed her nation, and we are sharing our know-how with other countries around the world. Now, with JNF's partnership and your help, Israel will become the culinary capital of the world. It's true. And we are the builders of the Negev and Galilee, so future generations of the Jewish people have a place of our own to call home. The recent film, Bohemian Rhapsody, is based on the true story of Freddie Mercury and his band Queen. Freddie reassembled his band so they can participate in the Live Aid concert. In front of 150,000 people at Wembley Stadium and more than 1 billion people watching live on television, Queen's performance is so spectacular that it's still considered the best rock and roll performance in history. Because of Queen's performance, Live Aid busts through its fundraising goal. Now, all of you are wondering, what the heck does this have to do with your VP of campaign? Expectations. JNF is expecting me to make sure that we bust through our ambitious fundraising goals. I'm not a rock star. I am not a star. I can't sing, and even if I could sing, I wouldn't, as some of you already know. You are the stars in the JNF galaxy. You are the rock stars that will put our fundraising over the top. You are the heroes who allow Jewish National Fund to continue to transform our homeland. You are the ones. Now please grant me some poetic license and forgive me for my next line. You are the champions, my friends. I can't believe I said that. Now I want to thank you for all you have done and express my gratitude for what you will do. Now let's go, and all together we will allow JNF to continue to make history.
האהבות הראשונות שלי מתוקות, המתוקות האחרונות שלי משונות, לא מבינות שאצלי אהבה זה כבר פסה.
I want you to know I was standing over there reading the script, and that was off script quite a bit at the end there. Ben, you're terrific. Thank you. Thank you for that very important presentation. My name is Michael Blank, and I serve as treasurer on the JNF National Board and proudly belong to the World Chairman's Council and President's Society. I would like to take a moment now to thank our friends at the Monument Group at Wells Fargo Advisors for sponsoring this plenary. Trip Shreves, we are so grateful for your support. Thank you for being here. Friends, today we live in challenging times as Israel continues to be unfairly singled out, especially so on university campuses across the U.S. Too frequently, Jewish students are uncomfortable expressing their faith on campus and feel pressured to hide their support for Israel. This ominous state of affairs on campus is not improving. Solidarity with Israel to face these challenges is more important now than ever. And so, it is very timely that we present the topic of this morning's session, Positively Israel, Influencing the Narrative on Campus. Today's panel will explore the current environment on college campuses through the lens of Jewish students, non-Jewish students, and academic faculty from a broad range of colleges around the U.S. We will be discussing topics that include BDS, the Boycott, Sanctions, Divestment Movement, Jewish life on campus, as well as advocating for and supporting Israel on campus while diving into Jewish National Fund's campus movement. Let's meet our panelists. First up is Professor Srinagesh Gaverneni, a professor of operations management in the Samuel Curtis Johnson Graduate School of Management at Cornell University. His research has him developing models and methodologies to solve problems in healthcare, agriculture, and humanitarian logistics in developing countries. We welcome Professor Gaverneni, who participated in Jewish National Fund's Faculty Fellowship to Israel this past winter. Next, we have Rebecca Thau, a senior at Harvard University, pursuing a joint concentration in history and literature and French, with a secondary field in Jewish studies. In addition to serving as a Jewish National Fund Campus Fellow last year, she engages in Jewish life on campus as the president of Harvard Hillel and a leader of Harvard's Reform Minyan. Rebecca is also a classical musical theater vocalist and has performed in several productions at Harvard. Joining Rebecca is Deandra Denton. a senior at Hofstra University, where she is double majoring in sociology and public policy and public service. Deandra served as vice president of Hofstra's Student Government Association and is an alumna of Jewish National Fund's 2018 Caravan for Democracy program. This semester, Deandra is interning at S&P Global in Washington, D.C. After graduation, she plans to attend law school. Also on today's panel, we have Mark McGuire, a senior at Seton Hall University. With a triple major in diplomacy, philosophy, and modern languages, and a minor in economics. A Caravan for Democracy alum, among his myriad campus activities, Mark is the captain of the Ethics Bowl team, president of the Diplomacy United Leadership and Communication Exchange, and serves as a student ambassador for the School of Diplomacy. Joining them is Maya Rosenberg, co-chair of this year's College Summit and a senior at The Ohio State University, where she is studying public management, leadership, and policy. She has served as president of Buckeyes for Israel, the premier pro-Israel student organization on campus, and is an active member of AE Phi sorority. She was a JNF campus fellow last year and has visited Israel 7 times, most recently on JNF's Alternative Winter Break. This is her 3rd JNF National Conference. Segev Kanik is a senior at Rutgers University and has dedicated his college career to connecting Jewish students to Israel, as well as addressing the importance of Mizrahi traditions, culture, and music in modern Israeli society. Segev has utilized college students' love of partying to raise over $3,000 for numerous nonprofits, including Israel Aid, Save a Child's Heart, and Jewish National Fund's Sderot Indoor Recreational Center. Our final panelist is Professor Amalia Leifesti, an associate professor in historic preservation at Clemson University. As a trained architect, Professor Leifesti combines a disciplinary background with educational training in sustainable design to the graduate program faculty at Clemson. We welcome her as an alumna of the 2018 JNF Summer Faculty Fellowship Program. This panel discussion will be moderated by Michal Divon, someone who is all too familiar with the challenge supporters of Israel face on campus and in the wider community. As those of you who were at our opening plenary know, Michal is an Israeli-American journalist and TV host living in New York City, where she is currently a news anchor and reporter for News 12 and has written for the Times of Israel and The Forward. Michelle, thank you for joining us. It's all yours.
Good afternoon. Shalom to everyone. Happy Sunday, as we say. You've made it this far. It's really exciting to be sitting on stage with these remarkable students and professors. I think a lot of people are very curious as to where things stand on campus. Everyone believes that this is the new battlefield. We're hearing so much about Jewish students and the challenges they have, or anyone who shows support for Israel. And I would like to start by hearing just a few sentences from each one of you to hear about your personal experience. Is it true? Is it as bad as we think? Let's start with you, Professor Nagesh.
I have a bimodal observation on that. I teach in a graduate school that's a professional school, mostly MBA students, and there Israel is celebrated because of its activities in Startup Nation. It's research in agriculture. That's what I'm also doing nowadays. And I'm a member of the Operations Research Industrial Engineering faculty, and Israeli academics are top-notch in that field. So when I went on my faculty fellowship, it was really an honor for me to meet some of the legendary researchers in my field. So when I'm in the business school, we see Israel in a very positive way. But when I step out of the business school and go to the rest of the campus, I see a slightly different picture. And very often, my activities have been interrupted, and I was left with, colloquially speaking, a bad taste in my mouth while I've gone to what I thought was a seemingly intellectual activity, and then it got disrupted by some of the protests that I have seen. So as a result, I wanted to educate myself about Israel, and so I went on the faculty fellowship so that I can be better prepared when I interact with the rest of the campus.
Thank you. Rebecca, how are things at Harvard University?
I'm really glad to say that the vast majority of things that happen surrounding Israel and also surrounding Jewish life at Harvard is almost all positive. We have a really vibrant Hillel, which is a beautiful picture of the diversity of the Jewish community, not just in terms of religious practice, but also in terms of Israel and in terms of political bent coming to Israel regarding Israel. We have seen some anti-Israel activity, which I'm sure we'll touch on later. But I would say that in my personal experience at Harvard, the majority of things that go on, not just about Israel, but about Jewish life generally, are positive.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Deandra, for you, someone who isn't compelled necessarily, or someone who doesn't have to deal with this, what do you face on campus? And maybe tell us also why you chose to be part of this discussion.
Sure. I think as a young person, specifically a college student, for me, it's really important to be a leader of the future and not the conflict. Prior to going to Israel, I didn't necessarily have a perception of what's going on or the conflict there. And so when I traveled to Israel, it was kind of a fresh start. And I learned so much while I was there, and I'm so grateful for the experience. But going back to campus, I was just so eager to talk about everything that I learned and everything that I saw beyond the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and so much that is highlighted in the media. So I'm just compelled to share the narrative and be globally engaged, proactive, going beyond what's on the surface level or what's highlighted so intensely in the media. Again, I want to be a leader of the future and not the conflict, so that's why I was compelled to go.
Mark, give us a little taste of what happens at Seton Hall University.
So I would describe the situation at Seton Hall very similar to how I would say Hofstra University was described by Deandra. We are generally speaking in a very good place in terms of how we're dealing with Israel and BDS movement. We don't have any movement on the campus, but like I said, and like Deandra has been pointing out, we really love to take this opportunity to speak with everyone, because as students who aren't necessarily Jewish, getting to go on Caravan for Democracy allows us to speak in a way, and particularly for myself as an international relations major, to the nuance of Israel, to the diversity of Israel, in a way that I don't think I could have accurately done had I not been on this trip. And it's definitely a great conversation that we're having. There are a couple issues we can touch upon, but overall I would say the situation is very, very good. Yes.
Thank you. It seems like we just have to send everyone on Caravan to Democracy, and that's it, right? The situation on campus is resolved. Maya, take us to Ohio State.
So while I am really proud of all of my fellow panelists that were talking about their very positive experiences on campus, Ohio State is definitely more of a mixed bag. So I've been at school for 2 years, and we have faced 3 or 4, depending on how you count them, BDS resolutions that have come up in our student government. And every single time, it creates a very tense situation on campus for those couple of weeks. But our community really rallies. We have hundreds of pro-Israel students that even if they're not engaged every day of the year, even if this is not what they're studying or not what they're interested in, when they know that our right to speak about what we believe in and what we feel is threatened, they come out of the woodwork and they stand up to our student government and they say, this is not what we agree with and this is not who we are as a campus. And we have lots of support from communities that you wouldn't expect. We have a large multicultural institute through our Office of Student Life, and every year when we say we feel like we're under threat for what we believe and what we say, we have so much support from people. So it really is a mixed bag. You have some really scary times and some really joyous times, and that's just what being a student at Ohio State is like right now.
Segev, before when we all discussed the panel, we said it's very important to focus on how everyone has a very different experience. And even in a place like Ohio State, there are times that are better and times that are worse. So Segev, tell us, Rutgers University, what has your personal experience been like?
At Rutgers University, we are blessed to have a really positive experience. We work with with student government and the president of our university to make sure that nothing happens against students, the Jewish community on campus, and we're able to have this unique opportunity to only focus inwards about how positive Israel is and never need to defend it because of the fact that we have this wonderful relationship with student government, with other groups on campus, and the presidents of the campus university.
All right, thank you. Professor Leif Vesti, for you as an educator, what has the experience been around the topic of Israel and BDS like?
Thank you. So I teach at a small outpost of Clemson University. So the experience that I might have in my very small program, where we have between 40 and 70 students, might not reflect the larger campus. But in our little small outpost, we don't have any BDS movement. We don't have anything that's sort of aggressively anti-Israel. So I see my role as an educator as more informing. It gets to be a proactive opportunity instead. We don't have anything negative or aggressive to rally against, but it's very important to educate our largely culturally Christian student body about other experiences. So Charleston has been a religiously diverse place since it was founded, and so we take opportunities to make sure that students who are maybe less familiar with that experience get to see the built heritage of not just Christians, but also Jewish builders, patrons, etc. So we include a tour of a synagogue in our first week for all the students, and for many of them, that's their first time in any place of worship other than a church.
Thank you. All right, so now we kind of have a feel of what each of you experiences, the tip of the iceberg, and also there will be a chance for the audience to ask questions later on, so in case I forget anything, you will have the mic. Rebecca, I want to start with you. You're at Harvard University, and everyone around the world looks at Harvard as an example and as a place of academic excellence. Why is it that the Israeli narrative isn't, and the historic context of the Israeli narrative isn't as present on campus? People seem to be joining this battle without really knowing much. And you're looking at a place like Harvard, the historic context isn't often part of the discussion. So tell us a little bit about any BDS you may have encountered and why you think we're not talking with the historic context that people should be aware of.
It's a very interesting way that you pose the question. I think on the one hand, it is absolutely true that people choose sides in the conflict in a much too simplistic manner. For instance, this year we unfortunately had a particularly dramatic Israeli apartheid week, in which our Palestinian students, a group, amassed support from organizations that have nothing to do with the conflict, including the Harvard College Democrats, a fact that Ted Cruz highlighted on Twitter, as well as the Phillips Brooks House Association, which is Harvard University's Center for Social Service, Harvard College Act on a Dream, which is an organization that focuses on immigrant rights in the United States. So a lot of various groups that don't have to do with Israel-Palestine were signing on to different components and aspects of this Israeli Apartheid Week. And I think a big part of that is the fact that there is an employment of certain language that people don't necessarily understand the full extent of. I think you're absolutely right that there is often a way of operating that does not allow us to necessarily dig into all of the complications in the historical and also contemporary context of what is going on in Israel-Palestine. I will say, though, that following that unfortunate experience, we did have an opportunity to open up further conversation on Harvard's campus about why Jewish students were disturbed that these co-sponsorships were happening, about why it seemed like the structure of having an Israeli Apartheid Week forces students to choose simplistically whether they are for or against Israel, whatever that means. And so I did actually see that despite the immediacy with which students siloed themselves off into one of these two sides, in the aftermath there actually was an opportunity for students to dig into some of the context and some of the deeper things that are going on in this incredibly contentious issue. I will also say that regarding history specifically, during my time at Harvard, I have been very lucky to experience Israel education not only in the context of our Hillel, but also in the context of our history department. We have classes took a fantastic class with Professor Derek Penslar, who's a Jewish historian, he called it The State of Israel in Comparative Perspective. And so there are courses that do deal with those things, as well as opportunities for Israel education within our Hillel itself, classes that happen every week about politics and in Israel, for example. And so I have seen both of the things that you've described, or both sides of what you've described, I should say, both the instant choosing of a side and also the desire to learn more. And I've also seen the way in which one of those can also lead to the other.
DeAndre, I'm curious to hear your perspective about why you think Israel is constantly being singled out. Why do students not care about human rights abuses in Africa and Yemen and Saudi? Why is it always Israel that everyone needs to take a stance, everyone has an opinion, and that everyone is constantly dealing with? Your take.
Well, I do think that students do care about issues elsewhere in the world, but why Israel specifically? Well, I think it's a hot issue area. People from different backgrounds do feel connected to Israel, whether you're Christian like myself, or Jewish, or of a different religion. A lot of people feel tied to that land. But I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Sure. Why aren't students, and of course campus is a place to be passionate and take a stance and fight for a cause, why are we not hearing about human rights abuses in other parts of the world, which we know are so much worse and incomparable with what's happening in Israel? Why is everyone focusing on Israel aside from personal identity and religion? What is stopping people from looking at other things going on in the world?
Well, I think it does go back to the media. The media does highlight a lot about Israel just as a geopolitical side of it all. And I don't know why people don't focus on more of that, but I do think it's a lot of the media. But from my perspective, and especially traveling with JNF on the Caravan for Democracy trip, I really wish that people spoke more about, and even hopefully one day get to experience all that's going on in Israel beyond the conflict, beyond the tension. I think one of my biggest takeaways traveling to Israel was the people, the culture, the stories, the backgrounds, the landscape, the creativity, the technological boom. There's so much going on there that people don't get to see, that's not discussed enough in the media, or that's just not discussed enough in casual conversations, especially on college campuses. So Yeah, I think it's the media because a lot of college students are tuned
it's
into their
my fault.
phones. No. We live in a social media era, and so people see what's on their feeds and what's trending on Twitter and things like that. So that's probably the root of it. But again, I do wish that people got to experience more of Israel and all that it has to offer.
We do too. Thank you. Mark, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how Israel shaped your own perception and perspective. How was visiting Israel for you, and maybe what surprised you? What did you come back with?
So I would definitely say that, of course, as I said, an international relations major, Israel is one of the most fascinating countries on the planet. To get the opportunity to look at it up close was really, like I said, an excellent opportunity. As far as how it shaped my personal perspective, it's very interesting because Israel isn't really what we would call in sort of my sphere of study. It obviously is well encompassed in my coursework, but my specific interest is more in security fields with something like Russia or China. So this was really an opportunity that I felt I needed to take because I didn't know when I would get to do something like this again, or if there ever would be an opportunity. It would shape my perception in a lot of interesting ways. I would say particularly about the social sort of status of things going on in Israel, about something like the LGBT movement was a fascinating opportunity to get to look into how Judaism and how the government is dealing with different issues in the social realm. How are we attempting to bridge divides between those of us who have different identity backgrounds? And so it was interesting in a sense because it's far more complex than it's made out to be, like Deandra said, in the media. And I think that's one of the problems when we talk about college campuses, is about this sort of emphasis on simplicity, particularly in the era of social media. If everything is supposed to fit in 280 characters, that doesn't give you a lot of time to tell a story. And I think that at times it's unfortunate that on college campuses, which are sort of supposed to be this basis for liberal, free-minded thought where we can discuss openly lots of important and somewhat controversial issues at times, we sort of resort to this reductionism of one way or the other, or we sloganize everything so that we can be part of a greater movement. And while movements are important, it's also to understand that we need to speak with gravity. So I think that the trip definitely influenced me and allowed me to speak to that gravity in a more nuanced way that I think was very helpful in the conversations that I've been having, and that the conversations I hope that everyone here is having on their campuses, and that I hope that future generations of people who go on Caravan can also engage in, definitely.
Maya, you mentioned Ohio State University has its ups and has its downs. You have your range of challenges that you have faced. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about BDS specifically, but it's not only BDS that we encounter on campus. There are other forms of anti-Israel sentiment. It can be borderline anti-Semitism. Tell us about what you've experienced, and then we can later on talk about the possible solutions.
Absolutely. So yes, we have faced a lot of BDS action. And I think one of the things that the BDS movement on my campus is pretty good at is they use their time in front of the student government to spur other actions on campus. So we've also had an Israeli Apartheid Week. We have a gorgeous student union building, and one of the things that they allow student groups to do is to rent out these big display cases. And for a couple of months this year, the Students for Justice in Palestine rented out one of the display cases and was having these huge displays of, map disparities and like, where is the real map? Can you figure out which one it is? And, Palestinian signs and Free Palestine posters, and that was what I would walk through every day to get to class. And it's allowed, and it wasn't hate speech, but it was something that made a lot of Jewish students and pro-Israel students very uncomfortable walking in a space that was supposed to be for all of us. And the university kind of said, we can't help you with it. Like, you have to keep going. And so there are like little ways like that, little things that they'll do to bring a Palestinian narrative into the spotlight at Ohio State. They are looking to build coalitions the same way that we look to build coalitions in our group. We really like to be proactive in the pro-Israel community at Ohio State. We like to form partnerships with other groups. I was talking about the Multicultural Institute earlier, and lots of student groups on campus that, feel connected to this, to our identity, to feel connected to the struggles that Israel and the pro-Israel community on campus have faced, and who see provocations the same way we see them and say this, it's not fair, that doesn't help the dialogue, that's not sitting down with people and saying how can we, create a conversation that's really two-sided. It's saying we're going to make a big loud show and hope people pay attention. And so we've had our ups and downs outside of the student government room, but it depends. Every week is different.
I see you're wearing a necklace with Hebrew on it.
Yes, so the necklace says Chazak Mesina, stronger than hate. So I was actually at the JNF summit last year when the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue happened, and I have family from Pittsburgh, and it hit very hard to be in such a space that I felt so proud of who I was and so connected to my Judaism and to my pro-Israel roots, and to wake up on Saturday morning and have people texting, "Are you okay? What did you hear? Do you know anyone in Pittsburgh?" It was a very shocking experience for me. I'm from somewhere very close to Parkland, Florida, so gun violence was something that was already, in my sphere of influence, and it was a very hard weekend. And actually, coming back to Ohio State's campus, I was very worried that it was going to dominate some of the conversations that we were having on campus, that it might, drag down conversations and bring us down to a level of recidivism. And the university showed up in support of the Jewish community in a way that I could never have imagined. We had a vigil on that Monday night, and we had hundreds of people show up to Hillel that just heard about it on social media or saw that the university was talking about it. They said, please come show up and support the Jewish community. We had students from Pittsburgh stand up and get to say, this is who I am and this is what I believe in, and it was the most incredible show of support that I could have ever imagined from my campus. And so life on campus it's really easy to look at this national narrative and say everything is ugly for Jews on campus who want to, speak about how pro-Israel they are and how connected they are to their Jewish community. But that national narrative, it only applies for, a couple of minutes at a student government rally. It's not what Jews experience. It's not what pro-Israel activists experience day in and day out. There's no way to bring it down to this is what it is or that's what it is. It's always positive, it's always negative. We deal with a little bit of both, and that's just what being a college student is nowadays.
And that was beautiful. You definitely deserve an applause for that. As an Israel supporter, Maya, do you feel uncomfortable on campus?
Absolutely. I think that I am very vocal about my pro-Israelness. I don't hide it. It's on my resume. It's on, I'm a member of the AE sorority, which is a Jewish sorority on our campus. I wear my necklace every day. I have a Jewish star ring. I am not quiet about my Judaism, and I am not quiet about my pro-Israel activism. Thank you. And there have definitely been spaces that I've walked into and said, I don't know if this is a space I can be in. There are organizations, like student organizations or classes, where I have felt I don't totally feel comfortable with where the conversation's going right now. And I also don't know if this is a place that I can be listened to. And I think that's a really big thing, is that in our pro-Israel spaces on campus, if you were to come into our, Buckeyes for Israel meeting and say, this is my opinion. I don't really agree with X, Y, and Z of what Israel is doing, but wanted to come in and have a conversation with us, please, welcome. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to explain ourselves. We'd rather get to this level of dialogue that's respectful and open. And there are a lot of spaces on campus that I think don't extend that same opportunity to people who are very vocally pro-Israel, that being pro-Israel stops you at the door. You can either leave that behind and join whatever conversation they're having, or you're not welcome as part of this conversation. And I think that's a really big issue that we're trying to tackle on my campus, is how do we communicate with those leaders to say, how do we make these dialogues more open and more respectful? And it's a challenge. We're not really sure 100% what to do, but we're working on it day in and day out. That's what, our students are really passionate about, finding ways to make those dialogues happen.
I'll open this question up to anyone who wants to answer. We are often reactive as Israel supporters on campus. We have to be on the defensive, and this takes away the opportunity to present our own narrative and to talk beyond the conflict and to show our story, because we constantly have to react. Why do you think this is the case? Whoever wants to jump in.
I actually think that there's an amazing thing that JNF is doing to help change that, to help change the fact that that's the case. Maya Segev and I were campus fellows together last year, and we all put on something called Positively Israel programs, where the whole point is that we were doing programs that were not about the conflict, that did not touch politics. I put together a karaoke night with Israeli music, and we had falafel parties, right? And these are things that allow students to experience Israeli culture, to have fun with each other, to meet new people, to make connections without having to define a narrative about politics. And in so doing, it gives people a thing to hold on to when conversations do turn into heated political debates, because you know Israel as more than just a place where there is a political conflict. You know Israel as also a place where we can learn about environmentalism, and where there is a thriving culinary scene, and where there is great music, and all of these different things. And I think that that's been a really powerful tool for us as leaders on campus, and being able to extend the conversation beyond politics.
Professor Nagash, did you want to say something?
In my experience, I think it's the modus operandi of the opposition. That's what they want. As Maya said, if we can have a structured conversation, organized conversation with truthful information, we are all up for it. But the situations don't present themselves in a manner where you can have such a honest, structured, organized conversation. Rather, these interactions occur rather suddenly when you don't expect it, and somehow we have to be prepared for it. And one possible solution or one possible remedy is, of course, it's training. One needs to be trained to deal with these situations. The second is obviously having the right information at hand. And very often, the negative information comes out more freely than the positive information. And those of us that have gone on trips to Israel now know that there is a lot of positive information that can be spread. And the third thing I want to say is use an allyship model. Build allies, and build them before you need them. Very often, when these allyship networks come up, they come up spontaneously after something negative has happened, but rather we should start building an allyship network proactively, and we should take advantage of that network.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from our other professor, Professor Leif Vesti. Do you hear anti-Israel sentiment in academic circles, in teacher discussions? Have you had students share experiences of feeling marginalized because of their pro-Israel sentiment?
Excellent question. I have not heard it from students. I have a colleague, a faculty member, who is very proud of his Jewish heritage. And I know that it comes to him in small sort of omissions, et cetera, maybe more so than aggressive anti-Israel sentiment. It's more so, an event is planned for a Friday evening or things like that. I haven't heard of students feeling singled out or these, again, really aggressive confrontations, but I know that it's happening in the sort of small points of friction that come from a very culturally Christian dominant major student body and major faculty body.
Thank you. Segev, we haven't heard from you in a while. So you said that the situation at Rutgers is pretty good, right? How do we build alliances with other student groups, and how do we create this dialogue that Maya said is so important to have?
So at Rutgers, we have, as been stated, it's very positive, so we can talk to anyone and we don't have any issues. With Positively Israel programming, we're able to bring speakers who can talk about a diversity of Israel, like with Titi, Miss Israel, or Naftali Aklum, who's coming soon. And we're able to basically talk about the issues in Israel and talk about what's going on with facts and explore the world of Israel without fear of being ashamed for saying maybe it is a problem. Because in a bad situation, we have to be defending, and we can never actually investigate why we support Israel, why we love Israel. And that's something that's so important to me about how we can do that. And one of the ways is by integrating with non-Jewish organizations. At Hillel, we have a program where we take 20 non-Jewish students, leaders, and 5 Jewish leaders to Israel and have them explore the conflict, explore the diversity of Israel. And that opens up to new ideas about Israel. One of my favorite moments was at the Kotel, and one of the students there said it's incredible that Jews are willing to give up the mountain and just pray at a wall in order for peace. And it's something that calmed me down because I was always angry about that we're not allowed to Har Bayit, that we can't go there. But a non-Jew student showed me the beauty of what it is and how Israel is fostering peace because of it. And that's a Jewish statement, that we want peace over anything. And that's what I loved about the trip.
So I'll ask one more question and then we'll open it up to the audience. If we look at the ages of students today, well, they were born to a reality where Israel is a powerhouse. You know, ever since 67, Israel is seen differently in the world. We're seen as having a strong military, of being one of the strongest, the U.S.'s strongest ally and one of the strongest countries in the Middle East. Do you think that part of the reason, and it's up to anyone who wants to jump in, students are developing anti-Israel sentiment is because of Israel's strength and because they don't have more of, again, the historic perspective to see that things weren't always this way? Is it just kind of our human nature to want to support the underdog?
I don't know necessarily how much it is about supporting the underdog or not, but I think students are very idealistic today. We know, because we've seen, that things can always be better. And so I think that a lot of our engagement with Israel and with lots of other issues, global issues, we are very idealistic. You can see it in the way that we talk about even American politics, the way we want things to be, and we're willing to go door to door knocking and trying to get people to agree with us. And so I don't necessarily know if all of the anti-Israel sentiment comes just because people are like idealistic about it, but I think engagement in this topic is because we believe that by stepping up and saying something on either side, we can change the conversation. We can make a little bit of a difference. We can get our hands dirty and make something happen. And I think that's true for a lot of pro-Israel activists that I talk to. They wouldn't be so engaged if they didn't think that their voice if they thought their voice didn't matter, if they thought that by saying something they were just going to be, brushed to the side like, oh, you're a college student, it doesn't mean anything. We're recognizing now that I might be 20 years old, and that is only 2 decades of experience, but I still have something to speak to. I still have a value in this conversation, that all of us on this stage have a value in this conversation, and that makes us say that we don't want to sit idly by while things we disagree with are happening. Whether the way we go about encountering those things we disagree with, I don't always appreciate when it comes from, BDS or other organizations that support that movement. But at the same time, those are people that are saying, I still want to make a difference. And I'd rather them talk to us. I'd rather, do something constructive like we're trying to do. But it all comes from a place of, we are valued in this society, and we want to make sure that we're not, being brushed aside and that our voices matter. Well,
Yeah, the voices of our students are definitely being heard. We see how in the United States, ever since Parkland, you're dominating. So I don't think anyone will have you sidelined anytime soon. Let's open it up to, yes. Yes.
So I want to say something, I think my perception about the student protesters, anti-Israel protesters. The pro-Israeli sentiment and the supporters of Israel are forever, but the student protester is often just there for a couple of years in college. I have often met protesters that are protesting in the school, and then I've met the same student because I'm a faculty member. I've been there a long time, and I follow what's going on. And 2 years later, we ask them what's going on, and they say, oh, I'm done with that. I'm gone off to law school, or I'm focusing on my career now. So it's really important to remember, I think it's amazing that you started with the historic perspective, that the student protesters, the history is not there. It just keeps reinventing itself every couple of years. And they're just looking for the one that grabs the most attention.
That's very, very interesting to hear. It's a time in our lives to be passionate, and you're saying that it's sometimes just the passing phase. All right, let's open it up to questions. Let's start on this side.
Start with the old man. I'm Rabbi Steve Foster from Denver, Colorado. And I appreciate what everybody has said, and I'm grateful that you are all so engaged. My question has to do with Jews, young Jews, who don't have such a positive attitude toward Israel, and who are not just speaking, but they're speaking anti-Israel sentiments, and when they do, it counteracts what positive things you all have done. And I'm asking about the tension that has been created because of that.
One of the things that I believe strongly is that the reason why there's so many anti-Israel Jews, and it's like a horrible thing to say, but is because of the fact that we have such a constrained ability to talk about Israel. Because when we're under attack and we're scared for our opinions, for our state, we can't say, let's talk about it to Jews. We tend to turn away and start focusing on outward when we should be focusing inwardly. And one of the things that I love about Positively Israel is that we have that opportunity constantly, that we're always talking about what it means to be Jewish and pro-Israel, what it means to be Israeli, what it means to be Jewish in general, because there's so many different facets of Judaism. There's Mizrahi Judaism, there's 800 different forms of Mizrahi Judaism. There's Ashkenazi Judaism, there's Ethiopian, and we get to talk about it and how all of those different cultures fit in Israel and that we belong there. And that's the most important topic we need to address, and that's what we should be focusing on entirely.
All right, we'll take a question from this side, and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, well, thank you everyone for all the work that you're doing. My name is Chad Kramer. I'm based in Boston. I became a JNF campus fellow as a senior at Hofstra University relatively recently. And I became a fellow as a senior because I felt that after 3 years of being on the defensive, the Positively Israel narrative is what we needed on my campus. And I definitely saw some results from that in a positive way. And I'm really happy that you guys are continuing that legacy. My question is more towards the professors. So yes, while the students are moving through every 4 years, they're very, the student groups are very, the population is always shuffling, but the professoriate, including at my university, are structurally enabling anti-Zionism to become a dominant narrative on campus. For example, there's courses at my school called, quote, Colonizing Palestine, which posit the Jews as foreign invaders and illegitimate in our historic homeland. There are consortiums and departments that are led by professors who are actively suppressing Zionism and suppressing Jewish students with opposing views. How are you combating this sort of structural anti-Israel organizing on the professoriate side, and where are the pro-Israel professors? Well, thank you for what you're doing, but unfortunately, at least in my experience at my university, it's really hard to find those sort of professors.
Thank you for your question. As I said early on, I teach in the Graduate School of Business, and I'm in a professional school. I think the environment is very different, as I said before as well, bimodal between professional schools and non-professional schools. Obviously, in my experience, I have not had this happen in the professional schools, and I've not heard of it happen at Cornell. So I'm really sorry to hear about your experience at Tufts University. But I guess you have to work with the school administration to talk about how courses are approved and work through the approval process and make sure the approval process is appropriately designed to meet the academic and the intellectual requirements of the campus. And that is about the only way we can stop these kind of activities.
Thank you.
Professor Lightvesti, do you want to weigh in?
Sure, similar sentiment. I'm very sorry that that's been your experience. Teaching in a curriculum where we don't talk explicitly about international conflict. It's not some of the majors of these wonderful panelists up here with me. It's much more about the subtlety and the nuance and working in positive examples into the curriculum, talking about some projects that I got to see and the way that Israel is really pioneering, especially some historic map making and integrating this idea of historic research and GIS, geospatial information systems. Anyway, so it's sort of about these more subtle things. I don't know of a class on our curriculum that takes such a aggressive stance. And so the way faculty members who I know of who are combating it are through the subtle, biases that we try to erase or try to balance towards the positive.
Thank you.
And thank you for your question. I know it was addressed to the professors, but I'd like to sort of articulate an example if I could, because it almost said, you were saying about positively Israel, right? But it almost sounds somewhat defensive in the phrasing of combating professors who have ingrained sort of ideas about Israel and what that may intimate about the curriculum. But I'd like to take just a little bit of a different approach about some of the themes that have been brought up about positively Israel, and maybe how do we continue that beyond the classroom? And I think that one of the key things is to, again, return to this idea of critical thinking and this idea that things you learn in the classroom can be applicable and that students can be the ones driving these types of changes. So I definitely agree with what's been said about checking about the curriculum, but in terms of integrating beyond college, we can take the skills that we have on campus. For example, I had a course, Institutions of Global Governance, and we looked specifically at the UN as a functioning institution and the UN Human Rights Council, which many people will note focuses a lot on Israel in its resolutions. And I think Maddie Freeman spoke really well as to the scope, the scale that we're talking about. And if we have places like Syria, the Congo, Afghanistan, and we see Israel occupying nearly a third of the resolutions out of that council, the question would be why? And then we look at this and say, when the United States was on that, this was the research we did, that number went down quite a bit. It's still very high. It went from 30-something% to about 20%. And then we, the United States, under the current administration said, because we think it's wrong, and they were right to say that there's this much focus on Israel, but we withdrew from the council, and now you've seen the number of resolutions move upward. I think if we can take critical thinking in our coursework and understand how systems work, even if the curriculum is structured in a way that promotes a pro-Israel attitude, we can take that information and drive that change if we can use those critical thinking skills and apply it in the real world beyond college to keep the positive Israel narrative flowing in institutions that can end up coming back to drive the college narrative later on.
Beautifully put. All right, we'll take a question from here.
Hi everyone, my name is Alana Lazar, and I do go to a politically charged campus, kind of similar to UCLA and Berkeley, where the Students for Justice in Palestine groups are very, very, very prevalent and very vocal. What would your recommendations be for creating a positive sentiment for pro-Israel students, as well as the whole pro-Israel aspect on campus?
Okay. I would say the biggest successes we've had are when we start with our core group, right? When there are 15 or 20 students who really believe in what you believe in and care about what you care about, get them in a room together and get them to start talking in a space where that you don't have to, whatever space that looks like on your campus, find that core group first, those people who say, we want to do something about it, and we're going to move together as a unit. We've always had the most success when we are in very politically charged times by getting the people who care about our issue in the room first and saying, okay, how are we going to tackle it? I can't speak, I think UCLA and Berkeley are a lot more politically charged even than Ohio State, and so I can't speak to the level of like constant vigilance you have to have on that type of campus. But for us, what we found is that when everyone's on the same page, everyone who's working for the same goal is on the same page, we're always much more successful about finding which spaces we can be in and finding which spaces we can make inroads in and finding where our networks are. Networks for us have been a huge part of the way that we've been able to be successful, and finding our allies that already exist has been super successful for us.
And if I could, if I could just add a caveat, I guess, is that I think I've had the most success in things at Harvard, Alana, when we've really had an expansive view of what pro-Israel means. Like when we make that coalition across different understandings of what it means to be a student that supports Israel. So maybe that's combining the students who fall more on the J Street side of the spectrum with the students who fall more on the AIPAC side of the spectrum with the students who, you know, don't really know where they stand politically but care about Israel somehow. And in that way, you're building a more cohesive and comprehensive understanding of what pro-Israel means in order to bring in the most students possible.
Thank you. So we start within ourselves, basically. We don't have much more time. We're going to have to go to our last question, although I'm sure you'll be happy to answer questions later on individually because everyone wants to know more. Russell Robinson, we will give the stage to you.
That means I could be everybody angry with me. So I'll just, because you'll have a chance to get together with him, but I'll say as part of the Jewish National Fund family, as part of faculty in Caravan for Democracy and Positive Israel and fellows, answer to us, what do we do and what can we do today and tomorrow to make a difference on college campuses?
I would say start by listening to students. Every single one of our campuses are completely different. We all have our own experiences. We all know what our atmospheres are on our own campuses. And we all have ideas and want to get involved. Students love opportunities to take that next step and say, I can do something bigger. I can think bigger, I can dream bigger, and I can make it happen. And I think something that JNF so far has been very good about is saying, to me at least, Maya, we trust you. We know what you know what your campus looks like. We're going to support you in what you need. And that's made all the difference for us. Instead of saying, this is the way it has to look, or that's the way it giving us the power has made a huge difference in the way that we've been able to operate on campus.
All right, I think we'll hear from everyone about, yes.
In terms of what JNF does, I would definitely say keep on putting on the Caravan for Democracy program. For those who don't know, the requirement for the program is that you have to be non-Jewish. And so I think that experience, the diversity in our groups who travel to Israel, it's great to come back with just a new awareness and a new education of Israel. So definitely keep on putting that program on.
To sort of add to that in an interesting way, bringing people to College Summit is absolutely amazing. Yes. And I would also say last year I brought some of my friends who are not Jewish and didn't really know much about Israel. And to watch them learn about Israel at conference was an absolutely phenomenal experience. And I think they similarly came away from it with a much deeper understanding of Israel and of the Jewish community.
Thanks, Mark.
I would definitely second that and say, if you can't bring them here, and you can't bring them to this conversation, take the conversation to them. If you have all this interesting knowledge, and people have interesting experiences and backgrounds and thought processes, and we don't get to experience that, or it might not readily occur to us, simply by introducing the topic is a very great first step and a very powerful first step towards driving a narrative. Because if no one is being the one to speak up, to introduce the topic, to engage, to be the one who opens that dialogue may simply be one that passes away and is never had. And we've been talking a lot about sort of ripple effects and the butterfly effect, about you never know what one conversation can do. And I think that it's important to have that dialogue and be part of those experiences and be open to what those experiences may hold for you personally, but also for those other people on your college campuses, because there are lots of interesting people, lots of interesting majors, and they'll be able to drive those changes in the type of fields that we've been talking about while we're up here, who will eventually again influence that process. So definitely be the dialogue dialogue starter, and be that person who is that communicator of the information. Bring it to your college campuses and just engage with it and have a lot of fun with it.
Coming from getting to experience the Faculty to Israel Fellowship, I think the emphasis on connecting or creating the networks between academics who practice here in the United States and academics who practice in Israel in the same field, it can't be understated. I think that is a really, really valuable thing to do. It gives faculty members the opportunity to integrate examples of positive Israeli events, activities, projects into the curriculum where otherwise that wouldn't have a place. So continuing to have it be faculty to faculty in the same field is a really, really valuable contribution.
To keep supporting the diversity that JNF brings. As co-chair, I'm so proud of what JNF did in this conference, where we brought Lucy Arish, Maddie Friedman, Naftalia Klum, and so many other speakers who bring this whole swath of what Israel is. And that's the greatest thing that we can support. And it's incredible. Keep supporting the diversity. Bring Caravan to Democracy. Bring College Summit kids. Support the fact that we are a multicultural society and a multicultural country. And keep loving Israel and the diversity in it.
A lot of good suggestions. At the risk of repeating myself, I would like to repeat the three things that I mentioned before. One is invest in spreading positive information. When I was on my fellowship, I observed how religious minorities are interacting in the Israeli society and how they are thriving, actually. And how Israel government has structures in place to engage disenfranchised, the LGBT community or the Ethiopian Jews. The Israeli Defense Force has systems in place to work with volunteers that have developmental disabilities. So these are things that we would never hear of on campus, and we need to figure out how to get that information out, positive information. The second thing is invest in having a structured, organized conversation. And the third thing is train in building an allyship network. Thank you.
So I'll just say thank you so much to our panelists, professors, and students for truly enlightening us today. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that a fascinating discussion? I just have to think about going back to the early 70s when my wife Cheryl and I were struggling college students to put together a pro-Israel group. We didn't have JNF or anyone really to help us, and we had to do it on our own. And that's why this is such an important program of JNF to facilitate this process. And because of this process, I think after listening to our panel, it's just amazing that there is a groundswell of support for the positive narrative on campus. So will you please join me in giving another round of applause to the students, to Michal, and to the faculty here. And by the way, I'm Ted Banks, the Assistant Vice President for Israel Relations on the Jewish National Fund's Board of Directors, and also a proud member of the Century Council and Negev Society. Please note that at 2:15 today, we'll be holding several concurrent sessions in different locations. Check your schedule so that you get to the right place. And by now, you've probably figured out this hotel and the different numbers. But most importantly now, I'd like to invite you to join us for lunch, which is available in the Constitution Ballroom, one floor up from here. Please enjoy, and we'll see you all soon.